My name is Stephanie Friedersdorf, and this is my YouTube final presentation for Food Service Management interview with Justin Papionetti. Justin Papionetti is the current sous chef for Terzo Piano in the Art Institute of Chicago, where I'm currently on internship. I thought it'd be interesting to interview him because his management skills are great, but I think he lacks certain communication skills in the kitchen. He helps run the kitchen, playing many roles from makeshift head chef if Megan is out, to helping the prep chefs by just doing small things for us so we can carry on with the larger things. I learned a lot about Justin. We covered basic questions posed to us in the outline for this assignment. I asked for things ranging from finding staff, motivating staff, and keeping himself motivated. There are many different factors going into the kitchen life, and learning that even the prep chefs do help out with influencing the decisions of the kitchen. I asked Justin where he'd been for all of his years in the industry, which come to 9, and he's been at Terzo Piano for about 3. He wasn't a very chatty person about his past, but I do know he worked underneath the master chef for 3 years. He worked at an award-winning steakhouse in Cleveland, and he's also worked at the Purple Pig. I asked him if he ever wanted to be a head chef in a restaurant, and he said no, he would much prefer to own his own restaurant, somewhere probably back in Cleveland, where both his wife and his family are from. We kicked it off with human resources, and you'd get the most standard answer out there. Glad to have him. He says it's good to have somebody at your back who knows federal and state laws, because it'd be really hard to be a small restaurant and have the head chef or general manager having to know all this information, taxes, unions, laws, while trying to worry about the food, the ordering, the menus, everything. Because Terzo Piano is owned by Bon Appetit, there isn't much for him to worry about, but they do need to be in good communication with each other. Next came talking about the staff, hiring them in, maintaining employees, and how to motivate them, and what to do to keep people in line. The interview process for new kitchen hires isn't a special or crazy process, but merely a start and an interview. We don't ask you to do a mystery basket, you don't have to cook breakfast for everybody. But you do have to be able to perform in the kitchen, and you do have to know the basics. If you don't know anything about mirepoix, you're not going to know anything about a delicious stock. And they also look for the way people interview, the way they handle themselves in the kitchen, and if they show up to their interview on time. People who show up late to an interview might never make it to work on time themselves. Then we moved on to talk about employees and what to keep an eye out for when people are working. He looks for employees who aren't know-it-alls, who are modest, because unfortunately it seems a lot of people coming into the workforce are arrogant. Greenhorns who went to culinary school on certain Food Network ambitions, not really understanding what the kitchen is like. He says you start off small, making only so much an hour, working long nights and weekends, holidays, and sometimes just feeling like you're suffering at the hands of the oven. His face when he was talking about it, he's just like, you get these people, and they just don't know, and they don't care to know, and they think it's just going to be some Pauline adventure. He says you really have to put your all into it, or you might just start getting cut due to performance issues, which he said he'll let you know about that one. We talked about when the kitchen gets slow, how they start to schedule employees based on performance. You can kind of tell where your standings are if you're getting let go out of most of the time out of the cooks who are there. If you realize what is going on, it can really tell you a lot about what you're doing. Is your ticket time too long? Are you taking too long with your projects? Are you leaving your team members behind? While Justin thinks being able to hold a conversation or do a few things at once is really great, sometimes there might be too much chatter, there might be too much distraction. We talked about me for a moment, and that if I have to stop to say something to somebody, I really do stop everything I'm doing. He doesn't mind too much when I do it, because I get back to work in a few moments, but it's something I really need to work on. If you come in on time, stay busy, and have a great attitude, you're not going to get cut first. For Justin, it's go hard or go home. He feels that common sense isn't all too common in the kitchen, so he came up with a little anecdote to help out some of the chefs who might come up with new ideas or who might be having trouble working with what they have. If you're working on a recipe or a task in the kitchen or something new, take the completed project and have a member of the front house read it back to you and kind of describe it to you. And if they can understand what needs to be done, it'll probably work well in the kitchen. We had a chuckle over that, but then corrected ourselves because that shouldn't be as funny as it was. If someone without back of the house knowledge, without the kitchen knowledge, can understand what you're trying to do, you're probably doing it right. Then he talked about training staff, going off on a small tangent saying if you aren't willing to help out your employees with on-the-job training, then you might be in the wrong line of work. Off-the-job training can be great if you can do it correctly, but he hasn't seen enough examples of that for there to be any preference for him. He wants to make sure that everyone can do their job correctly and is willing to work with someone a little extra if it means that the results in the kitchen are going to be great. How can you know exactly what the restaurant needs if you don't want someone to do it step by step? After talking about employees for a while, we started to talk about what kind of manager he is to the kitchen. As a sous chef, he comes in second to our chef of the kitchen, backing her up and being a sounding board for ideas. Some people disagree, but for the most part, all employees are on the same page about how service goes. Usually the lead line cooks, Justin and Chef Megan, get together to discuss the day. I asked about us, the prep people, because we never get to go into these talks even though we are our own little group. And he said even though we're not present for their conversations, they have, and they do, keep our status reports in their talks. Communication in the kitchen is 80% verbal, he says, while focusing on coaching, developing, and directing employees. He believes in self-motivation and positive reinforcement, and says that his style of management has worked out so far and that the low turnover rate speaks for itself. I didn't have the heart to mention this to him, but his self-motivation works, but he's not a very big positive reinforcer. On the occasion, he'll say something, and I think he hopes it stretches out for the rest of the day, but it just doesn't always work. You do know that you're in trouble if he does stop talking to you. It's kind of like Chef Freund. If he's not yelling at you, you know that you're in trouble. So, kind of like to see him change that, but how can you tell your sous chef? Gotta change your communication style. Continuing on, he does take all conflicts seriously, making sure both parties are heard and that a resolution comes from it all. Without a proper resolution, people can tend to harbor the conflict and let it affect their work. Everybody needs to be on the same page for the kitchen to not come to a grinding halt. And I have seen him use his conflict resolution between a supervisor and one of my fellow prep workers when the supervisor was giving lots of guff to the prep chef when she didn't deserve it. When it actually was, he was giving bad advice. It was his fault, but he just couldn't see it. She was able to talk to Justin because she was so flustered, she couldn't do her job anymore. She was bringing us down on a busy day, and Justin took care of it flawlessly. She was able to kind of unravel herself, and the supervisor saw that his attitude that day was bringing down the mood of the kitchen. So I know that he's a great, probably in the room, in the back room, not in the hustle bustle of the kitchen, a great communicator on a different level. Continuing on, we talked a bit about his personal philosophy about the kitchen, stating that what he thinks is really easy to understand. Treat people with respect. You can be firm, but not cruel. He wanted to talk about that while food is serious when you're in the kitchen, that sometimes people make mistakes, and at the end of the day, it's just a job. It felt really good to hear him say that, because while in no way do I wish to slack at work, I hate carrying the stress of the day home with me. So even if you have a few bumps along the road one day, someone in the kitchen has got your back, and you can just go home and relax. Throughout our conversation, he talked a little bit about his former self, about how when he was just starting out as a cook. He talks about the titles that get thrown around the kitchen and how in the beginning he just wanted to be a line cook. But then he started thinking about being a lead, and from there, when he became the lead, it just really turned into wanting to be a sous chef. He said, well, titles come and go. It's really all about working with your fellow chefs and earning and giving respect. Justin feels like he has grown tremendously over the years, not only as a chef, but a person. While titles are great, working with different people and gaining knowledge about all sorts of ideals and items is the most important thing to him. Being able to handle a restaurant on his own from time to time and being able to get in the trenches with everyone just makes him feel great at the end of the day, no matter what happens. I learned a lot from talking with Justin, and I feel better about having him as my sous chef. While sometimes I feel he is being curt with me, I've come to understand that I'm doing things well enough not to catch his attention or for him to worry about me. There are many things that go into a restaurant that churn out as many covers as we have without having anything go horribly wrong. And I do believe that my chefs are doing a great job helping us, taking orders, dealing with the paperwork, and just loving the food. Thank you.